another edition of the Blue-White Breakdown, PennLive's new Penn State football podcast. I should say primarily football podcast, because we did talk a little basketball last week. It is Thursday morning. I'm Bob Flounders, joined by Greg Pickel. We're hoping to hear from Dave Jones, who is supposed to be a regular part of our Thursday podcast. You never know with Dave, Greg. So we're gonna proceed on, and hopefully we'll hear from him in a couple of minutes. But Greg, I think both you and I didn't really expect to be talking about 0-1 Penn State hosting 1-0 Ohio State. It is what it is. They had every chance in the world to beat Indiana last week. They didn't. But let's look ahead. The Buckeyes, double-digit favorites. Penn State is shorthanded. We had a chance earlier this week. If the fans didn't have a chance to check it out, we did a crossover podcast with Nathan Baird and Doug Lesmerises of Cleveland.com a couple days ago. Please check that out. I thought there was lots of good information, Greg, from the Ohio State football guys about what they think about Penn State and kind of how they see the game. But as we sit about, 48 hours from the game, you and I are going to be going up. Just your thoughts, 48 hours out about maybe the challenge that Penn State's facing.
Well, I think by the time this goes live, I'll have a post up, Bob. It's kind of the three things I heard this week that Penn State players and coaches all said had to happen for Penn State to even have a chance to hang in this game. And the first two are obvious, and that's you can't turn the ball over three times, including two terrible interceptions and one muffed punt that didn't, that was just seemed like miscommunication. And then, Penn State got that back. I'm thinking the Will Levis fumble on the 7-yard line was the third turnover. Right. But still, the punt incident worked in Penn State's favor last week. It's not always going to moving forward. They are due some fumble luck probably. But at any rate, the second one was penalties. James Franklin, after the game, Bob, as you and I heard, was very quick to point out how uncharacteristic it was of Penn State to have 10 penalties. And look, there's a lot of people, I've got a lot of emails from people who said that the face mask was phantom. It looked like it was. That Pat Fryermuth's offensive pass interference was a little bit touchy, which it was close. I think by the rule it was a foul. But you don't see it called very often when it really wasn't blatant, I don't think. And then obviously the Jesse Luketa targeting, which James Franklin was pretty adamant that it's not that he disagreed with the call. He just doesn't know what more the guy can do in that situation. He, of course, will miss Luketa the first half of the Ohio State game. So they got to get rid of those two things. And then explosive plays, we heard a lot about that. And they think 16% is what Joe Moore had wanted, 16% of the snaps to be explosive plays. Penn State had 12.5% against Indiana, so they were obviously a bit off on where they wanted to be. I guess I'll throw it back to you with this question, Bob. And you look at this Ohio State team, they obviously can make explosive plays. Yeah. Do you feel confident in Penn State's ability to make those this week? And if so, who's going to make them?
Yeah, so let's just clarify explosive plays, because everyone's got a different definition. I believe the Penn State definition of explosive plays are runs or passes of 15 yards or more.
12 or more on the runs and 15 on the passes.
Yeah. To me, I consider explosive plays to be chunk plays. And to me, Greg, they are runs or passes of 20 or more yards, but it depends on your interpretation. What I did notice is it just seems like, and to be fair to Penn State, they don't have Journey Brown. They don't have Noah Kane. They're replacing KJ Hamler. They are not necessarily well equipped to be their best version of themselves when it comes to explosive plays. And really, Greg, other than that 60-yard throw from Sean Clifford to Jahan Dotson late in regulation against Indiana, it was a struggle for them to get in the explosive play range. And I don't know how you get better at that when you're facing an Ohio State team that is better defensively and is definitely faster. But we'll see. It was only week one. They hadn't played in 10 months, and maybe they'll be a little bit tighter. Things will go their way. I do feel pretty strongly that Ohio State's going to be able to generate some explosive plays, even though Penn State played very well, Greg, defensively, save for late in regulation and late, in overtime. 211 total yards. To hold an Indiana team to that, I think was pretty impressive. But really, you and I were both at the game last year at the Horseshoe, and James Franklin said it right after the game. Penn State defensively fought about as hard as they could to stay in that game. They still gave up 28 points. They forced a lot of turnovers. Had they not done that, Greg, they probably would have given up in the 40s. But really, if Penn State cannot get a handle on Justin Fields' ability to kind of run the ball or extend the play, it's going to put a lot of stress on the back end of that defense. And you just wonder, Greg, with the linebacker core the way that it is right now, with no Micah Parsons because of the opt-out, no Jesse Luketa in the first half, can they come up with a scheme to kind of limit Justin Fields, and force him maybe to try and make plays from the pocket?
Yeah, they're going to have to, Bob. And I think I don't think we saw any of Keaton Ellis last week. Or if we did, it was very, very little. I don't think he had a snap, though. It's sometimes hard to tell on TV who was in the slot. But yeah, I mean, I think if you are talking about getting a handle on this offense, I think he's one easy way to go about that. Get him some run, get him in the game, assuming he's not hurt or anything. And see what he can do. See if he can make a play. We saw him make some very good plays on the ball last year. We thought he would be a starter. Joey Porter Jr. has come in and kind of wowed everybody, and that's sort of taken over that starting job opposite Tariq Castro-Fields. But I don't think that means Keaton Ellis has completely lost a role on this team, and I won't be surprised if we see more of him as a slot corner, as a cover corner this week when Penn State goes to the 4-2-5. So that is one way that I think this defense could look different compared to what it was at Indiana. But there's no question that Penn State earned some breaks off of bad throws by Michael Penix Jr. or drops by Indiana receivers. They had guys open to convert the ball in the second half, and he just missed them. So Ohio State and Justin Fields, I don't think will miss those throws, but you never know. If Jason Alway, if that defensive line can get some more pressure, keep him in the pocket and contain him. The biggest problem Penn State was run into with this pass defense a lot of the time is that they get into these scramble drills where guys have too much time to cover downfield. And the guys on the other side are just too elite and have too much knowledge of where to go the defender can't have, and they end up in open space and moving the football down the field. So we'll see. Obviously, I think Penn State liked what it did on defense. I do think it could have probably given up some more yards had Indiana play a little bit better, but there was also some pass rushers that caused those throws to be poor. So time will tell Saturday night. But yeah, if you're Penn State, I think you have to weather the first half storm and hope that Lance Dixon and Brandon Smith, two guys who were considered elite recruits, can go out and make an impact right off the jump. Brandon Smith is a guy that played okay, I thought, but he didn't show up really on the stat sheet. Lance Dixon, kind of the same thing. So, when you recruit well and you feel good about a position group, sometimes it doesn't work out because of injury, like we saw with Journey Brown and Noah Cain. They went from one of the strongest running back rooms in the country to a group that is still very good, but not quite what they were expecting it to be. And with the linebackers, you lose Luketa, but you recruit it very well, and now you need those guys to step up. And I know you listened to James Franklin Wednesday night, and he was talking about, and I believe this was in response to a Jason Alway question, but that you have to have patience and guys take time to mature and all that. And no disagreement here, but at some point your guys need to be the guys and go out and make the plays you recruited them to make. And Penn State will have a chance to show that with those two guys and some other guys this weekend.
Yeah, what did you think, Greg? Now, we didn't go to Bloomington. Dave Jones was there. He got a better look at it than we did. But from your vantage point, what did you see from Devin Ford in his first heavy look as a Penn State running back? I think he had about 20 carries. Noah Cain went out of the game very early. He looked good early, but he's out for the year, lower leg injury. It's going to have to be, at least for the time being, until the freshmen get up to speed on all the facets that go with playing running back. Greg, what did you see from Devin Ford in the first game? And do you expect him to take a jump forward against a tougher defense?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things we saw with him is you can't run him the same way you run Journey Brown and Noah Cain. He's a different back for a reason. And I think Kirk Shiraka is going to have a new attack with this team with him this weekend. And they were kind of stuck where, they knew they weren't going to have Journey Brown, but they expected to have Noah Cain. And they had a game plan set up for Noah. And I think that they were hoping to mix Devin Ford in every now and again as a change of pace guy, but they did not have a plan for him to be the feature back. And so I liked some of what he did. There were times when, especially in short yardage, that the offensive line just didn't get enough push up front on 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1, 4th and short, And so he looked for a hole to hit, but there was just nothing there. I mean, he was met pretty much either at the line of scrimmage or a yard in the backfield. So there's a lot of talent there. I would like to see Penn State get Kevon Lee more involved in those short yardage situations. He's a guy that, they were trying to run, Ford's about 200 pounds, maybe, right? In like 195, 200. And they were running plays that were drew up for Noah Kane, who's at 226. Well, guess who's in that 226 ballpark, Bob? Lee is. So I think you'll see more of him in those situations, and that will help get Devin Ford into more ideal situations. So I'm not ready to punt on this offense yet. I know a lot of people were frustrated with Kirk Shiraka's play calling at times and the execution at times and Sean Clifford's play at times. I get all that.
Had 500 yards offense, man. They had 500 yards offense.
Right. And, they connect on one or two of those plays, either in the short yardage or down the field. And it's a different conversation that we're having heading into Ohio State week. So let's give it one more week, Penn State fans. I know you don't want to, but give it at least one more week. Let this guy work his system. I think you're going to see more drives like Penn State's opening one against Indiana this week than maybe some of what we saw after that, which was disjointed. And you could just tell. And, I don't know if we're giving enough credence to the idea that Penn State was down. It's basically 2 starting running backs before the game was 3 minutes old. So that's going to make a difference as well. But at the same time, Bob, the receivers, it's a big week for them. Cam Sullivan-Brown, not a COVID absence, according to James Franklin, but they want to see what they get out of him. It hasn't been much so far. Daniel George didn't take a step forward. It's going to be Penn State's going to win this game. I think you need at least a touchdown apiece from the 2 freshmen, Keandre Lambert-Smith and Parker Washington.
All right. That's almost like a bold prediction, Pickel. So calm it down a little bit. Just calm it down. We're about halfway through the blue-white breakdown. Greg Pickel and Bob Flounders. I have a couple of very important questions for you regarding this game. Before I get to them, though, Greg, just to remind our audience where they can find us, how they can listen to us, and also the fact that we're doing this every day. It's not just me and you and I. Dave Jones is contributing as well, as is Dustin Hockensmith. It's really 7 days a week now. We're trying to cover all the bases on a daily basis. But Greg, what's the best place maybe to kind of listen to and view our podcast?
Yes, the Blue-White Breakdown from PennLive, and you can find it on Apple, Stitcher, Google, Spotify, or wherever else you get your audio and podcast. The video version's also live at youtube.com/allpennstate. Don't forget to like, rate, subscribe. Let us know what you're thinking about this game, what you're thinking about the podcast. Leave us some feedback, what we can do better and what we're doing worse that we could do slightly not less worse. So give us all the feedback you want. And again, you can find it daily from Dustin Hockensmith and 3 times a week, Tuesday, Thursday, and after each Penn State game from Bob and I. So Bob, I got a question to you to roll things forward.
I can't wait. Let's go.
Did you get the sense listening to Doug and Nate talk on Tuesday that maybe Ohio State's defensive line isn't as menacing as it once was? Did you get that feeling? It sounded to me like maybe they're at a place where they've recruited that position extremely well, but perhaps they don't know if they have the horses at that spot yet like they have in the past. Or did I read that wrong?
I don't think you're reading it wrong, but I would just say this, if I was the Ohio State coaching staff, Greg, and I knew I had Penn State in week 2, I'm not trying to disrespect Nebraska, Greg, because I actually grew up as a Nebraska fan, but I don't know that I would have Ohio State's defense ready to bear its fangs against Nebraska. I mean, I think they're just trying to, maybe play a lot of guys, maybe keep it very simple, get them some experience, get them comfortable in their jobs, because I don't know how much they were really going to need that defense against the Cornhuskers. They're going to need them against Ohio State. But I definitely did get that sense from Doug and Nathan that maybe they were not – it wasn't exactly their A effort. And, maybe that's just that could just be a coaching philosophy. They got a new defensive coordinator, but they're definitely breaking in some new players. They hadn't played in a while. So I think you're going to know early in the second quarter whether or not the Ohio State defense is going to be as good as people think it's going to be. They do have a lot of talent. They've clearly recruited very well. They certainly are not lacking for 4 and 5 stars, but I think that's a fair question from you. That was a good observation. I bet you both Doug and Nathan would say They were maybe not surprised, but I do think that they thought they were expecting a little bit more. I just think that if you're going to see it, you're going to see it this week. Greg, let's just talk. You hear it a lot. Like you hear it from James Franklin. He talked about it Tuesday. I think you hear about it a little bit from the players. The sense that, hey, we're Penn State. We play Ohio State tougher than anyone. We've played them the toughest of anyone in the Big Ten in recent years. We could have easily beaten them a couple more times. Greg, it's a new year. It's a different year. Does that, in your mind, have any bearing on Saturday night's outcome? It's one thing to be a confident team, but after a couple series, doesn't that kind of go out the window just depending upon the task at hand?
Yeah, I think it's almost completely irrelevant. I mean, maybe it gives them a little bit of confidence, but I feel like they've been a confident team for the most part since James Franklin got here, and really since 2016 when they first beat Ohio State. Yeah. It took things to a level confidence-wise that we had not seen before with this Penn State program in the first couple of years of the James Franklin era. So, I mean, it's great to be close to Ohio State and be competitive with Ohio State. I mean, golf claps for that, I guess. But the players and the coaches on this team, they don't want to. And Sean Clifford said it yesterday. He's like, I didn't come here to hang with Ohio State. I came here to beat Ohio State, which is the mindset that he should have, number one. And number two, I think it speaks to the fact that it's great that you hang in there tough with these guys and that you are giving them maybe the best game that they see all year. But I just don't know how much of a difference it makes, especially in this year. I mean, they have some guys starting that played minor or no roles against those Ohio State games, in those Ohio State games in years past. They have some guys who are working, on offense in particular in a brand new system that Ohio State has not seen before and that Penn State has not taken against Ohio State. Now, Kirk Ciarrocca has some confidence because I believe the Gophers in years past have moved the ball on Ohio State. Some I could be wrong, but I think that it's great that you can say that you've been in it with them over the years. That's wonderful. But to settle for that is not who James Franklin is, not who the players and coaches in his program are. And so I think it's a fair talking point this week. But ultimately, I think Sean Clifford's nail on the head, which is that, it's great that we've been competitive, but we came here to win this game. And so Penn State gets it at home, which has obviously been better for them than on the road. But it's going to be a significant challenge regardless. There's a reason Ohio State's a 12.5-point favorite, I believe. Penn State's been a double-digit dog to them multiple times this decade. And some games, they've typically fared better than the point spread indicates they would. And I think that could be the case this week. But there's a lot of questions that were not necessarily answered in Bloomington last week that they're going to have better solutions for this week to not only stay in this game, but even have a chance to win.
Yeah, and I'm going to piggyback on that then, Greg. I know that a lot of people have written about it this week, and I think a lot of people are thinking this as well. It's one thing to play Penn State at Beaver Stadium when there's a whiteout and when there's 110,000 people and it's so loud. If you're an offensive player, you can't hear anything, and you get into this. You're snapping the ball from the line of scrimmage in the student section, and it's really tough to audible. There's false starts, there's delays of games. It's tough to communicate. That's one thing. And that is a tough environment. People think it might be the toughest environment in college football. Greg, when there is no noise and it's not going to be really a challenge, I think, to communicate, and there's no whiteout. I mean, how much is Penn State going to miss that against a team that has the athletes that Ohio State does? Because it has to have a significant impact on the game.
Yeah, I think the point spread tells you all you need to know. Don't you think This is a touchdown point spread if this is a whiteout week?
Yeah, I would say a little bit more. Yeah. And Greg, right away, I think the line opened at 8 and it shot up. It moved like 4 points immediately, and it's kind of hovering at 12, 12.5, 11.5. But I mean, it is a strength that Penn State has, is the whiteout and the crowd. It is an advantage. It does impact the other team. I know Ohio State's always embraced that when they had Urban Meyer. He talked about loving that atmosphere, but it takes a while to settle in. It just does. And I know Penn State did play Ohio State very tough in 2017 on the road without the whiteout. in the horseshoe, and they could have easily won that game. But I just think you're already without Micah Parsons. You're already without Journey Brown. You're already without Noah Cain. Now you don't even have the crowd on your side. If you want to make the list of pros and cons for Penn State to win this game, Greg, those are four really big pros. And they're not. You take those away, and Ohio State's isn't really missing much. I mean, there's some question whether Chris Olave, the wideout, is going to play, and if they don't have him, that's certainly going to help Penn State. But man, it is. I was just, when we were talking about this game before the pandemic started, maybe in January, the matchup, what it was going to look like with Penn State at full strength, Ohio State having to come in, to Beaver Stadium. What was that going to be? It was shaping up to be just a phenomenal game. And it still might be that way, Greg, but Penn State is going to really have to adjust on the fly. It's unfortunate, but there's no getting around the fact that they are shorthanded, and Ohio State is in a much more favorable situation right now.
Yeah, I don't know how you could view it any other way. I mean, they get Sean Wade and Wyatt Davis back from opting out. Yeah. Penn State loses Parsons to an opt-out. Now they lose a starting linebacker who was replacing him, Lucetta, for a half. They lose Journey Brown to I guess he's not going to play this week. I don't know. It continues to be bizarre where it's he's his medical condition and he could come back and we don't know when he's going to come back. I mean, I'm assuming he's out until we hear any otherwise. But wouldn't it be very James Franklin-like to just suit him up on Saturday, Bob, out of the blue? I don't think it's going to happen, but I'll throw things out there just for the heck of it because he hasn't said he's not going to play. So I guess there's that. But yeah, you lose Brown, you lose Cain. I mean, yeah, there's no question that Ohio State got the better of the pandemic roster shakeout. There's just no question. So yeah, they come in better shape and in a little bit better form than I think Penn State is. There's no argument to be made there. And so the Lions are going to have to, again, clean up some of the major mistakes they made at Indiana, play better in all three phases. Special teams, probably the biggest one. I mean, there's no Blake Gillikin to save 5 points like he did against Ohio State, back in 16. So it's going to be a gut check game for Penn State. There's no doubt. We'll find out where they're at, Bob. I think we'll know much more about where this team can go after this game. I know that's a small branch to walk out on, but we'll know much more about where things go after this. And I don't think you're going to find too many people picking Penn State to win, but I think you'll find a lot of them inside the number.
Well, Greg, then let's not dance around it. You teed me up. We got a couple minutes left here on the Penn State blue-white breakdown. It's going to be me and you giving our picks. I know there's some picks on PennLive already. I believe there are, or there will be very soon, depending on when you listen to this. How do you see the game? Give me one thing that might swing it the way you see it.
Yeah, I think that we've seen Ohio State, even when Penn State has a lead in the second half or it's close in the second half, they find a way to put a game away or come back and then put a game away. Penn State really has not been able to do that against a lot of teams, Indiana now included in that mix. So I think the Lions will give Ohio State a game. I do. We'll see. You and I will be there from Beaver Stadium to see all the action unfold. And I guess my biggest concern is that I don't see where Penn State's explosive plays are going to come from on offense to stay in this game. And I'm not confident in them being able to corral Justin Fields for a full 4 quarters. So put those two things together. I think, like I said, that Penn State stays inside the number, but I just can't see them pulling this game out. I believe I had it 30-24 Ohio State in that ballpark. There's definitely going to be some points on the board. I just don't see Penn State scoring enough of them to 34-28. I had it, Bob. I just don't see Penn State scoring enough of them and getting enough stops to win.
Yeah, the points you made about the defense and Justin Fields are I think that is probably the thing I would watch the most. I just think Penn State's linebacker group is going to have some issues there. The scenario that maybe they do corral Fields or they make life a little bit miserable for them, it's going to have to be the defensive ends playing out of their minds. Penn State's got 3 really good ones, Shaka Toney, Jason Alway, and also Adisa Isaac. They all, as the Indiana game went on, they all, I thought, played better and better and better. Even though Jason didn't have a lot of stats, he was in the backfield a lot. That the Indiana offensive line really struggled to handle him. Shaka Toney came alive late in that fourth quarter, had put up some big numbers. Adisa Isaac nearly had that sack, I think, in overtime. I mean, those guys have to get some pressure on Fields, but they also have to make sure he doesn't, maybe slip inside them, break contain. They're going to have to play really well. I think it's a huge key. The other thing is, I have my doubts about Penn State's wideout group getting separation against the Ohio State corners. And if you're going to score points against Ohio State, they're going to have to make some plays in the pass game. It's a tall task. I know you picked it close. I'm not going to pick it close. I'm going to trust a source I talked to this week who kind of sees it the same way that I do. They played them so tough and so close the last couple of years. I just think for all the things I talked about with the running backs and no Micah, no whiteout, no crowd, I'm gonna say 42-17 Ohio State, and I just think that Penn State can rebound after this game. And they made me look dumb before, but I just think the combination of what Ohio State has in Fields and some of those skill players and what Penn State is missing, Greg, I think this year in this environment, I think it catches up to Penn State. And they're just I see them really having a hard time as the game goes on, trying to match Ohio State play for play. But you might be right. You're usually right. I'm usually wrong. I have it 42-17, and I think it could be a pretty long second half for Penn State.
Where are we at on the clock? Do we have a quick time for a quick Dave Jones story or no?
Well, we're at 26 minutes, so if it's a quick one.
Dave, as everyone knows, his season predictions, we missed Dave on this podcast today, but he picked Penn State to lose at Indiana and then win this game. Called me around noon on Wednesday and was debating whether or not he was going to go back on that pick after watching.
Oh, he called me too. He called me too, the flip-flopper.
He ended up picking Penn State anyway, 26-24.
I'm gonna start recording my conversations with Dave Jones off so he can't claim one way or the other, but he is the world's greatest flip-flopper, if you guys don't know it. And also, Greg, even though he's not with us, I just want to give a shout out to Dave. It was National Black Cat Day on Tuesday. And I know that's a big day to Dave. He's experienced a lot of them. We're thinking of him. May have many more, but yes. So he's got Penn State winning
26-24.
I'll tell you what, if he hits the back-to-back upset parlay, Indiana and Penn State, I will tip my cap to him. I don't like to do it, but that would be a pretty gutsy call on his part. Hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to him soon.